Hi, my name is Jay Sutton. I'm a director for Platonic Power and manager of their Toba Montrose hydroelectric project. Today I'm going to discuss some of the ways opportunities and mentors played a role in my career development and what my thoughts are on what it takes to attract and retain leaders. I started my career as a commercial diver and underwater welder. I'd always loved water and construction work, so it seemed like a natural fit and the perfect combination of two things I loved. But after a couple of years, I started looking around at the guys I was working with, and they'd been diving for 20 years, and they're doing pretty well exactly the same thing as I was. So I really started to question the sustainability of diving as a career. There were, of course, safety aspects that didn't lend it to having a family, and I didn't really feel like there was a long-term challenge. And that was really the first career lesson for me. I needed to have some room to grow and advance, as well as a challenge to really be fulfilled. One day while I was diving, I met an engineer who was doing inspections on my welding. I discussed what his job was, and it really sounded interesting, so I decided to make a career change, and I went back to school to get my engineering degree. But again, after a couple of years, I ended up doing the same work, and I was looking for a change and a new challenge, so I made a decision to change companies. So I went and joined BC Hydro on a large dam project in Trail. And there I had 3 different mentors I worked for on the project. 2 that were construction managers, and the other was a design engineer. But they really all managed from the same philosophy and mentored me from the same philosophy. And I called it managing from the weeds. They basically gave me nearly unlimited responsibility and decision making, but whenever I needed some help or advice, they'd always be there to poke their heads out and give me a hand. They allowed me to make some big mistakes, and it also allowed me to learn from them, which is probably the most valuable thing I learned in those years I worked at Hydro. The day I finished working at the dam, I got a call asking if I was interested in working on a floating bridge in Kelowna. And that was the second type of career change I experienced, basically opening a new door on a new opportunity. The job met my criteria. I thought living in Kelowna would be great. So then I took advantage of the opportunity. I picked up my family and spent the next 3 years working on the $150 million bridge project. But the company I was working for at the time didn't really have a succession or mentoring plan for their managers or their young leaders. And as a result, I really felt like I was on my own most of the time without much guidance or leadership. Now, thankfully, I worked with a number of really knowledgeable senior project managers and engineers on the project, and by working closely with them in teams, I developed in those years really more through osmosis than having a structured mentorship or leadership plan. But once the project was done, my priorities was changing, and I was looking for another challenge. My kids were starting to get into school, and they were getting tired of being moved around the province from job to job. I wanted a project that was larger, something I could have a longer-term involvement in, allowing us to settle down and put down roots, and also something I thought would be more sustainable. And along came an opportunity in Platonic Power. And they met all the criteria. They had some really large projects, huge challenges. They were building clean power, which I strongly believed in. And I also thought the company was interesting. It's a pretty young, dynamic group, sort of an average age of 40, and the company was young too. So I thought there would be lots of opportunity to make some change. And there are 2 types of management there. One was pretty informal. There's a goal at the end. You guys have to figure out what the pathway is. No guidance on what the path would look like or what the risks would be. It was similar to the managing from the weeds I spoke about earlier. The other was slightly more interactive and much more intense. And although the picture exaggerates the severity, the point I want to emphasize is that both of the styles really worked for me. I took different characteristics from both of them and thought both of them were very valuable. I learned structure and discipline from the interactive style, and creativity and flexibility from the more passive style. Now, Platonic actively developed succession plans for their employees, and I was interested to find that nearly all the management employees were hired through word of mouth rather than through headhunters, which really spoke to me about the attractiveness of the company. And companies like Platonic, I think, have 3 attractive characteristics that make people want to work there and attracts leaders. The first is having challenges. And Platonic has some of the largest wind and run-of-the-river projects in the province. And I really believe that challenges naturally attract leaders. If you put a challenge in front of a room of people, the leaders, I think, naturally step up and accept the challenge, while the others fall behind and follow the leaders. The second is exposure to experience and knowledge as well as support. People will use resources as much or as little as they need, but they need to know that support is always going to be there. And I think this is the foundation that really gives people the confidence to grow and to make bold decisions and really become leaders and thrive. And the final thing was sustainability. I think companies need to have long-term goals that you can relate to. You know, can you see yourself working there in 5, 10, or 15 years? The key to retention is really having work that will keep you challenged and interested. And I felt Platonic had all of those necessary characteristics. A man, as a general rule, owes very little to what he's born with. A man is what he makes of himself. And this quote really resonated with me because I think that when it comes to leaders, not everyone wants to be one. And people who are meant to lead will push their way into leadership roles. But when we do identify leaders, it's really important to keep them engaged and interested and fulfilled. You know, leaders are really the assets of the company, and they're a lot like common machines. They can't run flat out forever. They need maintenance and they need shutdowns to be effective, and they get much less effective if they're overused and worn out. And finally, it needs to be recognized in order to be effective, leaders need to have lives outside of work. And in my experience, it's really easy to say that family comes first and you need to have a work-life balance, but in practice it's really hard to do, and not just from a company perspective, but also from a personal perspective. And I think if we're going to keep our leaders engaged and retain them long-term, we need to find a way to make those concepts reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. Our next speaker is Barry Billings, Manager of Talent Development at Tech Resources.
Right. Well, good afternoon. I believe there's 3 things that have really shaped my career over the last few years, and that's purpose, passion, challenging opportunities, and I forgot the last one, mentorship coaching. But the most important for me is passion. And when you look at this picture, I have a passion for the earth. I've always asked questions. I've been interested in wanting to know what's happening and why it's there. So I went off to get a degree in geology, and I went to Queen's, and I said, hey, I want to study about the earth. I want to make this a better place. And they said, well, you have to pick between geology and geography. And I said, well, why can't I do both? I've got a passion. I want to do a medial. They said, no, you can't do that. And I said, why not? I said, okay. And we figured it out. After 4.5 years, I got my degree. Problem was, there's not much of a job opportunity at the time for pseudo-geologists, so I ended up going to summer and being a toy soldier at Fort Henry Guard in Kingston. Discovered I had another passion: people, military, camaraderie, leadership, and how do you inspire people. So I ended up signing up with the military. Now, I was a third-generation son of a soldier, so that's my dad on the right and my grandfather on the left, and we'd all been in the military. So I signed up, and I never looked back. Of course, I did that through the ROTP program, so I ended up being in the military and owing 4 years. 2 days after I graduated from Queen's University, I was on the German Autobahn in a 42-ton tank going down 45 kilometers an hour, responsible for 16 soldiers and 4 $2 million tanks. About 6 months later, I was asked to go and take 20 soldiers, 20 vehicles, and go to Holland and look after an exercise in which I had to be an Russian invasion force for helicopters. I knew nothing about helicopters. I knew nothing about Russian tactics. My leader said, here's the manual. Call me if you have any questions. About a year after that, I was asked to select and train for 1 year our top soldiers to enter a German military competition which specializes in reconnaissance, which, again, I knew nothing about. I was asked to finish first. The highest who'd ever finished prior to that was 12th. We finished third. But it wasn't without challenges. In this photo here, I was lucky enough to receive a reward, but I had some monumental failures. At one point, I lost a large sum of cash. Expecting to be thrown in jail, the first question my leader said was, what did you learn? I guess I keep learning, so that's good. Later on, I was posted to Royal Roads Military College as a leadership instructor, And I really enjoyed that job, and I realized I had a real passion for helping people learn about leadership. But I also realized that my purpose was beginning to be misaligned. I no longer wanted to be in the military for its ultimate purpose, so I decided to get out and follow my passion again for the earth and the outdoor pursuits. I became an adventure guide in Australia, and worked with, I worked with kids, I worked with corporate events, and I worked with strategic leadership retreats. But it wasn't quite what I needed, and so I went back home to Canada at one point, and I met my board of directors, which I call my board of directors. That's my dad, second from the left. All the guys in this photo reported to my dad at one point in their careers, and I reported to all of them at one point in my career. So you can imagine they were all asking me, so you quit. Why'd you quit? Are you doing what you wanted to do? And I said no. So I went back and decided I needed to jump into leadership consulting. And I met this fabulous lady who took a chance on me and said, "You're military? You've never worked in the corporate world? Okay." Next thing you know, I was working for consulting for the largest mining company in Australia, challenging their leaders to be better. 5 or 6 years later, after doing some really good work there and was the lead consultant in our office, I sat down with my leader at one point after going through some high potential assessments, and I said, I've got successors lined up. What's next for me? And they said, "You're brilliant. We love you. We see a great future for you, but we're not sure we want to move you right now." And I said, "Well, I'm moving." So I left. I came back to Canada to become a coach. Not that kind of coach, but an executive coach. I went to Royal Roads and got my degree in that, and I started up my own executive company and executive coaching company. But I knew I still wasn't getting close enough to my purpose and making the difference I wanted to, until someone touched me on the shoulder and said, "You know what, Tech, there's a job going on, and it's all about helping people being what they really need to do." And this photo kind of captures that sense of leadership and the earth and everything that I believe in. It was important to me at the time, so here I am with Tech. I've only been there a couple months now, but I think this picture really captures what's important for us at Tech, in the sense that, we're dragging some rock out of the pit, but and that's the resource that we're pulling out of there, and whether it's gold or silver or copper. But the most important thing, you can hardly see it, are the two guys in the truck. That's our most important resource that comes out of the mine every day. And so I'm proud to say, when you think about everything I've been talking about, we've got some great programs that try and do exactly what I've been talking about, trying to figure out what people really want. And a lot of the times what they really want is to be rotated, they want challenging assignments, and they want to be educated. Now, at the same time, I've got the rest of the company saying to me, "Barry, can you develop these systems and processes? And, we're really not good at succession management." And the interesting thing is, though, the more I try and make that a system and a process, the more people tell me, "Keep it simple. That's too complicated." So that's one thing I'm really learning, and it's essential here. Having said, so I'm running towards the end here, and I'm trying to summarize, and I'm thinking to myself at some point when I was getting ready here, yes, coaching, mentoring, challenging opportunities, but one of the things that really struck me is people do not want to be processed. There are mysteries to be unraveled, and we really need to remember that. So I'll let you have a quick read of that, and then I'm going to summarize. Are the followers reaching their potential? To me, what we're really talking about here is leadership. As much as we might want to go out there and create some sort of management framework that's going to help people be better, it's all about leadership. So thank you.